Good morning, everyone. It's Jennifer Roll with the RPT. We're going to wait just a couple of minutes. We have a large number of attendees for today's webinar, and so we want to just provide just a couple more minutes to allow time for everybody to log on. So we will get started at approximately 10:05. So thanks, everyone, for taking the time to join us today. All right, it is 10:05, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks, everybody, for participating in our poll. We've got a few poll questions that we'll throw out there through the course of today's webinar, but I am glad that I'm in the majority today who is participating in the webinar with the camera off. So that is definitely the majority of the group for today. So again, Jen DeBrule, thanks everybody for taking the time to join us today for the Transit and Special Programs Workshop. We appreciate everybody taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us for a little bit and hear about what's going on the transit program front as we prepare for the fiscal year 22 application cycle. So for today's webinar, just a couple of points related to GoToWebinar. I'm sure all of us are experts at this point with all of the virtual meetings that we've had in 2020, but we do have all of our participants in listen-only mode. We are just ask that we stay that way and keep our phones on mute so that we can make sure that we have good audio throughout today's webinar. We are going to have question and answer breaks offered at key points in the webinar, and we're going to have time at the end for just an open Q&A. So plenty of opportunities for this to be interactive. We do have a couple of ways for you to participate and ask questions today. You can use the raise hand function that is located on the right side of the GoToWebinar window. If you want, use the raise hand function if you want to verbally ask a question, and then I can recognize you and unmute your microphone. Or you can also submit questions via the question or chat function in GoToWebinar. So we'll be following through, watching for those questions during the course of today's webinar. Once we get through today's webinar, we will post the recording on our Merit webpage. If you have anyone that wasn't able to join today, or if you just want to go back and listen to some of the content again. So in terms of welcome, and normally we would be in one of our, either our conference room or a nice facility somewhere. We'd have breakfast and goodies. Unfortunately, 2020 has just not been the kind of year that we can do that. We do look forward to seeing everybody in person again next year. But we do have the whole DRPT transit team on today's call. We have Marie Berry with us from our finance team. So we've got the whole team here, even though you can't see us. We are going to, and what I'm going to do is we're going to have each one of our speakers just to give a brief introduction when we start walking through the agenda. So in terms of today, this is really a little bit of a mashup of a workshop. We usually do a workshop in the spring when we put our 6-year draft program out, and really lean on Marie Berry and her expertise to talk about the 6-year program approval and award process, with 2020 being strange as it has been. We are working on that at the same time we are opening our application cycle for fiscal 22. So we are going to do a little bit of both. We're going to start off with Marie, and she's going to talk about that 6-year program approval, the award process, contracts, things that will be happening over the next month or so, at the same time that you're going to be working on your applications for fiscal 22. I'm going to give you a brief kind of view into the cracked crystal ball that it is for fiscal 22, a couple of high-level program points there. Turn it over to Grant Sparks to give you some updates on our special programs, and then Dan Sonnenklar and Clinton Edwards are going to walk you through our capital assistance program. Xavier Harmony is going to talk about our operating assistance program, and then we will come back to Grant to talk about performance reporting, and then kind of walk through our calendar and key dates. And again, we will have multiple breakpoints in there for questions as we move ahead. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn it over to Marie to talk about the fiscal year 21 6-year program and award process.
Good morning, everyone. This is Marie Berry. I work in the finance department. I am the financial programming manager, and I would say most of you probably know me, but if you don't, you can contact me with any questions or concerns about your contracts and your funding. So with that, next slide. Okay, so 2021 SIP was, and 2020 was unusual, to say the least. So we have not been doing anything the standard way that we normally do, obviously. And so we've been basically trying to give out the 21 funding piecemeal throughout this year. We started back in, we actually gave out some funding back in May, I believe, for some CARES funding. And that was for the rural grantees. So that was just to kind of get the rules a jump start for the beginning of fiscal year 21. On top of that, back in June of 2020, we tried to get at least as much as we could approved for 5303, TDM mobility, which is now called CAP, 5310 operating and mobility management, and basically we were just extending the 2020 SIP to get you guys funding for 2021. So this was just a way to get things piecemeal approved so we can get some money out there. Now, the federal funding, luckily, we did have that access to that, so all of that could be awarded out early. So anybody with federal funding didn't have any issues. Next slide. And then in September, we got some more funding approved for operating assistance, TDM assistance, and then the 5310 vehicles, we got that approved. And then in October, we had the remainder of the CARES funding approved. And then what we're going to be doing in December is we're going to be getting the rest of the 6-year plan for 21 approved. And so hopefully, and that's next week, December 9th is the CT meeting where we get the actual fiscal year 21 SIP approved, 6 months late, but better late than never. So we've also been giving out all the contracts piecemeal as we've been getting the CTB to approve pieces of your funding. So when next week happens and the CTB approves your remaining funding, we should be able to get the contracts out to you soon after that. Hopefully within a week, we'll have those posted in Olga for you all to be able to execute them, and we can get your funding out as soon as we can. In December, so next week, what we're going to be having approved is the Senior Transportation Program, Demo, Intern, Tech Support, Urban Capital, the rest of the Urban Operating, the rest of the TDM and Mobility Operating, and that should be the end of it. And I believe we also had some increases in some 5310 vehicles, which is probably not this audience, but that will also be reflected in the new fiscal year 21 SIP. Next slide. Okay. So for our federal programs, people that are getting federal funding, there was a new STIP approved by FTA and FHWA effective October 1st of this year. And so make sure if you are applying for your federal funds or getting federal funding that all of your federal funding is in the current STIP and TIP. For the rural grantees, DRPT does take care of that and make sure that if you are not in an MPO area, we make sure that your funding is in the STIP, so you don't have to worry about it if you're not in an MPO area. Also, your FTA certs and assurances, make sure those are pinned in Olga as well. We have not gotten a new one yet for 2021. Usually, there is no usual time. The FTA is behind as everybody else is. So we're not expecting to see one soon, but we never know. So it usually comes maybe in the spring, but every time the new one comes out, we'll let you know, go in and pin that. Also, if you are a 5311 grantee, you have to make sure you pin your special warranty arrangement document, which is attached to the application. So this is nothing new. It's something that you've always had to pin and agree to. And that should be it for federal funding. Next slide. Just a couple notes about Olga. Make sure your information is up to date, and make sure that you can have people other than master users get notifications for agreements or any other functions that Olga provides whenever we post a document. There is a way for the master user to assign other people to get notifications. Also, make sure you have the right person authorized to pin your agreements. It's very important. These are legal documents, so they have to be pinned by people that are authorized to contract your agency with us. Also, the state master agreements were updated this year, and I believe most of you have already signed that and returned that. And this year, they are all the executed state master agreements are posted in Olga. So you should be able to see the fully executed state master agreements in Olga. So if you have any problems with that, give me a call, let me know. and it'll try to guide you through that. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is just kind of a brief overview, but we're really hoping year 22 is a normal year. There's some feedback in there. Okay, so applications are due in February, except for 5303. The draft should be out in April. The final should be out in May, and the CTB should approve the final fiscal year 22 SIP in June. And that is assuming everything goes normally next year. I didn't know if Jen wanted to add more things to the fiscal year 22 process, but we shouldn't have any other, we should be back to normal for the next application cycle, or at least that's our hope. And with that, I'll turn it back to Jen.
All right, thank you, Marie. Any questions from our audience? I see we've got one question from Jim Aslenka, but I think that has to do specifically with operating, so I'm going to hold that one till a little bit later in the presentation. But any questions for Marie for with regard to the 2021 awards and that process? Right, I am not seeing any hands raised or any chat or questions just yet. So Mark, okay, Marie, we've got a question from Mark Adelman. He's asking if we could use pre-award authority now.
For which fund?
He doesn't specify in this question.
He's a role grantee. So yes, you can, we are applying for federal funding using pre-award authority. So yes, starting July 1st, you should be able to go ahead and start. And there is one thing I need to note. The CARES funding for the rural grantees, we're still in the middle of applying for the rest of that funding. So until that funding is approved and awarded by the FTA, we're really hoping that's like within this month, but you never know with the FTA. That's when the agreements for that can be written, is after the FTA awards the federal funds. We're hopefully the CARES funding we've already given you will carry you through until we get to your next agreement. But yes, you have pre-award authority on that.
And Marie, I believe that the CARES Act funding came with its own pre-award authority when as part of the act that came out of Congress. So I do believe that the CARES Act funding also has that pre-award authority as well.
Yeah,
and
right.
And
so the amount we gave them back in March, I think, it goes back to January. So yes.
And we had some conversations about potentially providing the pre-award authority for state capital as well back to July 1st, since there was a delay in approval of the program. So I think, Marie, we just need to touch base and make sure that it would be helpful to me if there are folks that are in need of pre-award authority for the state funding as well. And that way we can make that recommendation to the Commonwealth Transportation Board.
When we write the state formula agreements, they all have a July 1st start date, with the exception of some of the rules have an October 1st. Perfect.
All right, Marie, I don't see any other questions in the chat pod, but I know you're gonna stick around with us till the end of the webinar as well. So thank you. As always, Marie keeps us all straight when it comes to funding and contracts, and we would be lost without her. So Marie, really appreciate that. I'm going to take it now. I'm going to have one whole slide to give you as I indicated, my cracked crystal ball, fiscal year 22 look ahead. There are a number of things that we are already looking at for fiscal 22. I don't know if we've included it in briefings for this group, but as we worked on the fiscal year 21 program, we were greatly benefited by budget language that provided flexibility overall for the transportation program. That enabled us to move funding kind of outside of our normal formula boundaries to be able to prioritize operating assistance. We anticipate that we will continue to have that same flexibility into fiscal year 22. It cannot be understated that being able to leverage the CARES Act funding that the state received for the rural systems really helped us this year in making sure that we were able to provide some additional operating or a higher level of operating assistance than we did in fiscal 20, and really to be able to fulfill the capital requests that were prioritized. So that flexibility continues to be very important for us going into fiscal 22. We also recognize that, a lot of things have changed in the last 8 or 9 months. And, about a year ago, we wrapped up a 5-year capital needs assessment. Really appreciate all of the information and the partnership with the transit agencies. That capital needs assessment really helped build the foundation for the case of the additional funding that we did receive through the omnibus transportation bill that was passed earlier this year by the General Assembly. Recognizing that COVID has kind of upended a lot of things for us, we do see a need, and because we didn't publish a 5-year capital budget as part of our 6-year program update, we are going to have a need to rebaseline our capital needs assessment when we're able to look a little bit more into the future. Really want to ask folks to be thoughtful in when you're preparing your applications and you're working on those 5-year capital budgets, that we want to use that data to do a new capital needs assessment that's more responsive and reflective of the impacts of COVID. So as you work on your 5-year capital budget, just kind of keep that in mind, that we're gonna be rebaselining that and kind of looking out into the future to do some more long-term planning and resource allocation planning at the state level. Another thing that I want to emphasize in looking into fiscal 22 is the importance of leveraging funding. As I mentioned already, we really benefited greatly, all of us really benefited greatly from the CARES Act funding, and our ability to leverage that CARES Act funding in place of state funding for the rural transit agencies was really significant for us this year. I don't know what the future is going to hold in terms of another potential stimulus bill or federal reauthorization, but being able to leverage every available dollar that's out there is something that we all need to work together to do. So I'm going to mention, I think we mentioned it last year, but I think it's as important as it has ever been, that as opportunities for those agencies that do utilize federal funding, we want to partner with you to apply for federal discretionary funds, things like bus and bus facilities, low, no emission vehicles. We need to leverage as much of that federal money as we can going into the future. So as you're working on your 5-year capital budgets and that capital needs assessment, as you're working on your, in the future on your transit development plans and transit strategic plans, we would like to, help with targeting potential projects that could be good applications for those federal discretionary programs. That is something that DRPT can certainly help with, is potentially preparing those applications or getting letters of support, whether it's at the state level or at the congressional level. We've had, just in things that we're doing at DRPT, we've been successful this year with pursuing those federal discretionary dollars, and to the extent that we can bring that more of that federal discretionary money back to Virginia, we want to try to do that. I do want to caution particularly the small urban agencies that in terms of state-controlled federal funding, that those agencies look for to help fulfill their capital requests. We do not anticipate having as much state-controlled federal funding available to us as we have in the future, or as we have in the past, going into the future. So we don't have as much flexible STP as we've had previously. So we're going to be looking to use our state-controlled 53. I'm gonna get my numbers wrong. 5339. But we're going to have to prioritize. So you are going to see some changes in the application relative to if you are asking for state-controlled federal funding in addition to state capital funding for your application. We are going to have to prioritize, and so those federal dollars that you may have received in the past cannot be assumed going into the future. So again, that's another area where if you have a big bus purchase or a facility improvement, those are the projects where we want to make sure we're working with you to apply for federal discretionary funding because we do not have as much of that state-controlled federal funding available to us. We've also made some changes with our Section 5310 program. And again, this is trying to leverage funding and to have greater flexibility in terms of being able to make program allocations. We have combined the application process for Section 5310 and State Senior this year and going forward. That helps us to utilize funding where it's eligible in the areas of the state that have the greatest need. We have some areas of the state that don't have enough Section 5310 to meet the demand in those areas. We think we can use some of that State Senior where it's eligible to help fill some of those gaps. So there are changes on the Section 5310 side as well. We're also looking over the past few years, we've had to move some Section 5310 requests that are made by public transit entities. We've moved them to the Section 5311 program, and we'll work with those agencies to make those requests under Section 5311 because we are seeing a greater call on those Section 5310 funds. It's really important as we go into the future that we build upon solid planning. I think we've had a good year in terms of completing our first handful of transit strategic plans. We've had some TDPs completed. Now may not be the optimal time to kick off those kind of planning efforts with all of the uncertainty, but it's really important that that your capital needs are reflected in your TSP or your TDP, and that you're keeping those documents updated, and that you're making sure that your application aligns with your adopted planning document. So please make sure that you follow through with that, and those TSP TDP update letters are due to us in the middle of January. Next thing I want to mention is development of major capital projects. We changed our application guidance on major capital projects, and this is, when I say major capital projects, I'm not talking about how they're prioritized, but I'm talking about significant facility improvements that we're looking to break those into some logical phases, starting with a feasibility study, then in a first request, a second request to get to about a 30% design phase, and then a final request that would be looking to fund out the project, show any leveraged funding to help bring that project to fruition, and also to make sure that we have a solid financial plan. And then that's where we can enter in with a multi-year funding agreement to kind of commit to that project over time. But we really are trying to build a process that shows that we've got a financial strategy around those projects. And the last thing I want to mention in the look ahead is the importance of budgeting for operations. I know that this, and this is is particularly targeted to the Section 5311 to our rural providers, because your process is a little bit different. Typically, we do a Section 5311 reconciliation. Because we've had such an influx of CARES funding to the Section 5311 agencies this year, unless there is a specific need, we are not anticipating doing that end of the year call for reconciling those Section 5311 operating funds. We are also looking again into the future and looking at some modifications to that process as we move forward. The last thing that I'll mention in our look ahead to fiscal 22 is we made use of our summer while we were waiting, as Marie said, for the 6-year program to be ready to move forward. We do have 2 updated guidance documents for you. We have updated our grant administration procedures. So this is the post-award, or what we're now calling the Purple Book. So this update will carry us for fiscal 21 and through fiscal 22. And then on the application side, we have updated our application guidance that we're referring to as the Blue Book, and that is for fiscal year 22. And both of those documents are posted on our website. So all of the material from today is consistent with these guidance documents. And with that, I know I threw a bunch at you, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have before we jump into special programs. All right, I see a hand raised. There are so many attendees, I have to scroll. So, Queenie, I can't unmute you. I think you've muted yourself, but Queenie, if you can unmute yourself, I'm happy to answer your question. All right. Doesn't sound like she can't work out the technology, but so we'll come back to Queenie, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Grant to walk us through special programs.
All right, good morning, everyone. As Jen mentioned earlier, my name is Grant Sparks. I'm the Manager of Transit Planning and Corridor Development, and I'll be presenting some information regarding our special programs. Next slide. So I'll provide a brief overview of our special programs, which include 3 individual grant programs. The Public Transportation Intern Program, the Technical Assistance Program, and our Demonstration Project Assistance Program. Prior to the FY21 grant cycle, we did make a number of changes to these programs. Most notably, we more clearly defined the scoring rubric that we use to evaluate applications for each program. But for FY22, we did not have many changes. So the information that I will be providing should be more of a refresher and hopefully can assist you if you plan to submit an application this coming year. Next slide. So first I'll go over the intern program. The goal of this program is to support the hiring of interns who are interested in pursuing careers in public transportation and enables these individuals to gain experience in transit through hands-on work. Traditionally, we've seen a lot of applications submitted to support transit planning interns, which is perfectly acceptable and aligns with our program goals. But we also encourage applicants to think of other areas of public transportation that might be appropriate to develop an intern, whether that be transit finance, operations, communications, maintenance, or anything like that. The match rate for this program is 80% state and 20% local. And this program is open to a number of eligible organizations, including transit agencies, local governments, public service corporations, planning district commissions or PDCs, metropolitan planning organizations or MPOs, human service agencies that are involved in rural transit, and then also commuter assistance program operators. In terms of eligible expenses under this program, wages, fringe benefits, training, and travel that does not exceed GSA rates are all eligible. One thing to note about wages, intern salaries are based on an hourly rate multiplied by the number of hours that the intern is expected to work within 1 year. While applicants may propose a hiring rate based on their own employment markets, a DRPT internship funds uses a standard rate of $20 per hour. So applicants who wish to use a different rate than the $20 per hour rate that's kind of standard for this program must contact their assigned DRPT program manager or myself if you're not a transit agency prior to submitting an application, just so we can talk about that special rate. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, we introduced a new scoring rubric for our special programs in FY21, and the applications in Olga align with the new evaluation criteria that we use. So for the intern program, this rubric is shown in the table on the right. The first scoring criteria is the project scope. This is where the applicant needs to kind of outline the scope of the internship, the budget for the internship, and a basic schedule for the intern. We also ask applicants to include a draft hiring announcement as an attachment with their application. For the intern work plan section, this is where applicants need to focus their efforts on really creating a solid work plan, which describes the anticipated work that the intern will be performing, and a draft timeline of these tasks. So we're looking for applicants to really show that they've put some thought into how the intern will be utilized and what specific tasks they will be performing. For technical capacity, we require that all applicants identify an intern coordinator at their agency who will serve as the point of contact for supervising the intern and executing that intern work plan. This individual does need to be specifically identified in the application in order to satisfy this area of project scoring. And then last but not least, the monitor and evaluation plan. This is where the applicant should describe the approach to measuring performance and evaluating results of the internship. So in addition to the scoring rubric, last year we also added some reporting requirements to the intern program. A quarterly report is required at the conclusion, a quarterly report is required throughout the duration of the internship. And then at the conclusion of the internship, a final report must be submitted to DRPT that documents and describes the work performed and any recommendations for how to improve the intern experience moving forward. If you are interested in applying for the intern program and you have some specific questions, a lot of the information can probably be found in the blue book that Jen mentioned earlier, which is posted on the DRPT website, or you can reach out to your program manager if you are a transit agency or myself. Next slide. So moving on to our technical assistance program. This program supports transit studies, plans, and research to help improve, justify, and evaluate public transportation or commuter assistance services. Such projects may include studies, plans, and technical evaluations. They could include feasibility studies for major capital projects and innovation. So if your agency plans to submit a major capital project through SmartScale or through our Merit Capital program, or even an innovation project through our Merit Demo program, this may be an opportunity for you to meet some of those readiness requirements associated with those programs. Additionally, technical assistance program supports studies and plans that help meet federal requirements, such as transit asset management plans and public transportation agency safety plans, or PTASP. And also on the state side, technical assistance can be used to address our state requirements for TDM plans or transit development plans and transit strategic plans. Similar to the intern program, eligible applicants for technical assistance include transit agencies, local governments, public service corporations, PDCs, MPOs, human service agencies involved in rural transit, and commuter assistance program operators. And the match rate for this program is 50% state and then 50% local. One note about the local match for this program: grantees may use federal or other non-local sources of funds to help cover their 50% obligation, but a minimum of 4% pure local match is required. So for example, a project could ask for 50% GRPT technical assistance funds, and then cover the remaining 50% with 46%, and this is just an example, 46% federal 5303 funds from the MPO, and then 4% local funds. So that is an option for you. If you're interested in taking advantage of that, you can let us know if you have any questions. Next slide. So the evaluation criteria used for the technical assistance program, again, we have the scoring rubric on the right. Project justification, this is where we're looking for the applicant to explain the need or the problem that the project will be addressing. So why is this project necessary and why now? For project scope, we're looking for applicants to describe their approach to addressing that need or problem, and really just providing a clear understanding for the project and any desired outcomes. For technical capacity, we're looking for the applicant to identify a project management team and their ability to execute the project. For project budget, this is self-explanatory, but we're just looking to make sure that the proposed project budget aligns with the project scope. And then last but not least, the schedule and the timeline. We're just looking to make sure that the applicant has the ability to start and execute the project scope within the proposed schedule. Last year, we also added some clarification regarding eligible activities and expenses under this program. I won't go into detail of what those changes were. I would strongly encourage any applicants to, again, refer to the Blue Book, which clearly lays out the eligible expenses and activities. Next slide. So the last special program that I'll be covering is our Demonstration Project Assistance Program, which aims to incentivize the implementation of new transit services, as well as test innovative and non-traditional public transportation solutions. So through this program, DRPT hopes to reduce the financial risks assumed at the local level. So what we mean is that we understand that launching new transit service or deploying a new technology often comes with some degree of uncertainty with regard to fiscal impact. So we're really trying to reduce that burden and take that on at the state level. Eligible applicants under this program are a little bit more limited than the intern and technical assistance programs. Eligible applicants include transit agencies, local governments, planning district commissions, and MPOs. Private corporations and transportation management associations may participate in this program, but they must partner with an eligible applicant. So one of those 4 entities listed on this slide. For match rates, this program offers an 80% state match with a 20% local match. Next slide. So last year we broke the demo program up into 2 different sub-program types. Type 1 demo projects include projects that test new transit service. And then type 2 demo projects include all of the innovation and technology projects. In our Blue Book, we more clearly define the readiness and eligibility requirements for each of these sub-programs. And I'll go over them a little bit in the next slide. But first, a few just considerations as you develop your project applications. We do encourage applicants to use the DRPT Technical Assistance Program as an initial step in developing a demonstration project, and that's especially for the Type 1 new transit service projects. So if you plan to apply for demo funding that will support the operation of a new, say, transit route, you'll want to make sure that you have a documented need for that service through some sort of planning study, which could be funded through our technical assistance program. So as far as the scoring rubric goes, again, it's on the right of the screen. It is similar to our technical assistance program, but a couple key differences are that 1, we ask applicants to provide a letter of support from the agency that's providing matching funds. This is to demonstrate a local or regional commitment. And we also ask applicants to develop initial performance measures as part of their application to help us understand how success will be evaluated. Next slide. So the 2 different sub-program types for our demo program, it's still pretty new, so I'll quickly go into a little more detail on eligibility and readiness for these 2 program types. So Type 1 projects, again, are for new transit services that are introduced in new areas or markets that are not currently served by public transportation, or for new transit services that make connections to areas that are currently served by public transportation. We are looking for some sort of feasibility or planning study to justify the need for the new service. Additionally, there were some questions about this last year, and just a point of clarification, this program does not fund projects for services that have been previously discontinued. We had one example where an agency had a specific transit route that was discontinued due to lack of funding, and the applicant was looking to relaunch that service through demo, but that was not an eligible project because it was previously discontinued. And then the last bullet under Type 1 projects, we're not typically looking to fund traditional transit services that are eligible to be funded through DRPT operating assistance or federal funds. But rather we're encouraging applicants to kind of think outside the box and propose new ways of delivering transit services. So thinking of microtransit or other technology-based transit services. That's really what we're looking for here, but you can submit projects that are for traditional services as well. For Type 2 projects, these again are for the technology and innovation deployments, where the applicant is testing a proof of concept for use in public transit. Again, a little clarification on technologies that are eligible under this program. We're looking for emerging technologies and innovation projects in the transit industry, not for new technologies and solutions that have been widely deployed in other areas, but are new to the specific agency. So for example, automatic passenger counters or APCs or mobile ticketing, while those might be new to your transit agency, those are not new to the transit industry in general. So we will not be funding those types of projects through the demo program. But for example, a project that would be eligible, we've funded some automated shuttle deployments in the past, and some other innovative projects through this subtype. So again, emerging technologies and solutions in the transit industry, not for the transit agency itself. And then the last bullet point here, these technology and innovation deployments may be proposed in areas that are currently served by public transportation or in areas that do not have transit services yet. So these projects could enhance existing service, or they can help deploy transit solutions in new areas. I've mentioned this a few times already in my presentation, and Jen mentioned it earlier, but again, if you have any questions regarding these special programs, we did put a whole lot of detail in the Blue Book, which is posted on the DRPT website. So please use that as a resource. Additionally, your DRPT program manager or myself, please reach out to us if you have any follow-up questions regarding your applications for any of these special programs. So that is all I have, and I will turn it back over to Jen for questions.
I am going to launch another poll. Coming your way to get some input on what DRPT special program grants you are interested in pursuing this year. So I'll leave this open for just a little bit here, and also feel free to submit your questions or raise your hand if you have a question for Grant. All right, we're going to tally those last few votes in our poll, and I'm going to close that out. So, you know, we put this poll question in because, you know, it's hard to tell in a year like this, you know, where everybody's what they're thinking about. So it is exciting to hear that 26% are planning to apply for demonstration, 44% are planning to apply for technical assistance, 28% of the respondents for intern, and 35% are not planning to apply for any of the special programs this year. So I am not seeing anything in the question right now, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dan Sonnenklar to start talking about our capital assistance program.
Great, thank you, Jen. Again, my name is Dan Sonnenklar, and I am a statewide transit planner with DRPT. I also manage the prioritization scoring for the capital assistance program. So I will be providing an overview and refresher of the program over the next few minutes. Just as a general overview for FY22, there have been no major changes to the capital assistance program or the application process, though there is one small new requirement for bus shelter projects that I'll get to at the end of these few slides. anyone that has gone through the application process over the past 2 cycles, this will all be very familiar to you. So you can go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. This slide here outlines the general steps involved in the capital assistance prioritization process. The first step is that projects are screened for eligibility, which includes making sure that the project or projects are included in agency TDPs or TSP documents, or if not in the document, in the annual update letter that is provided to DRPT in January. This also includes a review of open grants to ensure that grants for the same or similar assets are not sitting open and unspent. And it also includes various checks for readiness to implement. So this would be the inclusion of cost estimates, the inclusion of studies completed if applicable, and engineering and design for larger construction projects. Once eligibility is checked, the eligible projects are filtered into 3 categories by project type. Those 3 project types are state of good repair, minor enhancements, and major expansions, and I'll get to more on this in a moment. The projects are then scored according to the methodology outlined in the capital assistance technical documentation, which is posted on our website. It is also available through the OLGA portal, and they are scored according to the methodology specifically outlined for each of the project types. Next, projects are ranked according to their score. And finally, funding is allocated to those that meet or exceed the scoring threshold for each category. And there is a note here that the scoring threshold is dynamic and is based on the pool of applicants received in a given fiscal year, along with the funds that are available that year. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned in step 2 on the previous slide, projects are sorted, scored, and prioritized by project type. This slide outlines those 3 project types. The first one is state of good repair, which is projects or programs to replace or rehabilitate an existing asset. We break that further down into 2 subgroups outlined here. SGR type 1 is the replacement or rehabilitation of a specific existing asset. So this would be the replacement of, say, a bus or a revenue vehicle. And SGR type 2 is the purchase of assets to replace unspecified assets as needed. It also includes grouped programs of projects and special asset categories, which I will get to on the next slide. The second project type is a minor enhancement project, and this is projects or programs to add capacity, technology, or a customer facility that meets the criteria outlined here. These projects must cost less than $2 million in total, and if they include expansion vehicles, the project should include less than or equal to 5 vehicles or 5% of the fleet size, whichever is greater. And then on the flip side of that, the third category is the major expansion category. And this includes projects or programs to add, expand, or improve service. And those projects, this is projects that exceed $2 million in total cost. And if they are for expansion vehicles, they exceed 5 vehicles or 5% of the fleet size. I will mention it here, although it is not written on the slide, that for both the SGR and minor enhancement categories, the state will provide up to 68% of the total cost of the project. And for the major expansion category, the maximum state participation is capped at 50%. Next slide, please. So under state of good repair type 2, we have included a group of categories, which are defined here. We call them special asset categories. And these are projects that are normally considered SGR, but that are very difficult to score based on the parameters outlined in the technical guidance. So for this reason, all of the projects that fall into special asset categories are scored and evaluated alongside of the minor enhancement projects. And so this includes the categories listed here, which is the purchase of tools to provide maintenance services, other maintenance equipment, spare parts for both vehicles and rail cars, building items and fixtures that are not part of a larger rehabilitation or replacement project. So this is things like replacing the flooring, stairs, hand dryers, lighting systems, etc. This also includes grouped assets or programs of projects that are less than $2 million. This is groups of projects that are difficult to break down into individual parts because they contain too many. It includes general SGR projects for parts or for rail track. But I did note here that this does not apply to vehicles. All replacements and rehabilitations of vehicles must be applied for individually under the Type 1 category. And finally, this also includes other financial tools for capital investments that can't be scored based on their useful life. So this would include capital cost of contracting for agencies that use that, and debt service on previously approved projects. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned in the beginning, the only new requirement for FY22 is for bus shelter projects. So all grantees that are planning to apply for shelter projects that will utilize federal funds must complete what we are calling a shelter project supplemental form. This includes projects that aim to replace existing shelters. This includes projects that include the installation of new shelters in new locations. And it also includes projects that include the purchase of spare shelters that are to be installed as needed. The form that we ask that you fill out provides information on site and location, historic resources, and any associated reviews if applicable, and environmental considerations along with associated reviews if applicable. The responses to this questionnaire will be considered as part of DRPT's project eligibility review and weigh into the final decision that DRPT makes on the project. And again, I will reiterate that this is only for projects that are planning to use federal funds. So that's 5311, 5307, 5339, or other federal sources. And that is the last of my slides. So I'll kick it over to Quentin Edwards to talk a little bit about electric vehicles.
Thanks, Dan. The last two of our slides this morning for the capital program before we move over into operating, we're going to just briefly discuss alternative fuel vehicles and electric vehicles. Here on this first slide, in FY22, we have approximately $5 million remaining in the Volkswagen mitigation trust funding. We'll get back to that on the very next slide. Also, with this alternative fuel program, DRPT will consider requests for alternative propulsion vehicles, like it says here on the slide, electric, hybrid, natural gas, several factors including local and federal funding being leveraged. Jen touched on this a little while ago regarding DRPT interested in partnering with transit partners across the Commonwealth on discretionary vehicle federal opportunities. So that's a point there. Second point here is the inclusion of alternative fuel vehicles in the transit development plan, transit strategic plan, or other plans. Just kind of tripling down on what Jen spoke on earlier and also Dan. What we want to see is a good level of planning and that it actually aligns with your application. What we also like to see here is other plans. For instance, in the Northern Virginia office where I am located, and allow me to introduce myself, Clinton Edwards, Northern Virginia Transit Program Manager in the Northern Virginia District Office. Where we're located there in the Northern Virginia office, the city of Alexandria has their environmental action plan, which is Eco City Alexandria, where the city of Alexandria is looking to, for the services that are provided to the residents and the citizens of Alexandria, they're looking to make many of the services that are offered more environmentally friendly. So on top of wanting to see this different type of propulsion in your TDP or transit strategic plan, if your jurisdiction or area has some sort of action plan, we'd also like to see that. Approved funding for necessary infrastructure alterations If you are going to a different type of propulsion, we want to be able to see that the funding is available so that any modifications that could be moved, that need to be made to your facility, those fundings have been secured so that we know that this is something that the transit agency or locality really wants to move to. And then coupling that with the last part, the clear intention of migrating a significant portion of the fleet to alternative fuels. What we're not looking for are really just one-offs that we want to try one vehicle here and one vehicle there. We want a kind of a synergy between all of these planning documents and really seeing that the agency is moving toward moving the entire fleet to this alternative fuel. Availability of other resources, Dominion rebates. Dominion Energy currently has a smart charging infrastructure pilot program where Dominion Energy is offering rebates which are available for qualified electric transit bus charging infrastructure and installation. Dominion is currently offering rebates for charging station rebates and then also make ready, basically to get facilities ready, and installation rebates. We have some brief information on that, but I know there's a representative from Dominion online that can also answer more questions on that. Next point, projects for charging infrastructure eligibility. Just wanted to give anyone that's interested in going in this direction that the charging infrastructure upgrades are eligible as a standalone project, assuming that it is a part of one of the plans that I had previously mentioned and then others that presented before me. And then finally on this slide, small electric vehicle transit vehicles, DRPT, we are currently exploring the possibility of doing a statewide procurement and these new options become available next year. So for those that in their fleets have BOCs and transit vans, we just wanted to let you know that we are looking at making that available through a statewide procurement. Next slide, please. And the final slide on capital, this was the first one of the previous slide. DEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality, and the Volkswagen Mitigation Trust. This is a current partnership with the FY22 merit program. There's $5 million available with this partnership between DRPT and DEQ. Eligible projects include the State of Good Repair capital projects that are going to replace eligible older diesel. And I'll just, as you can see, eligible and diesel are both underlined there, just emphasis on those eligible and older diesel public transit buses with new all-electric buses. Those eligible buses are 2009 model year or older Class 7 and Class 8 diesel transit buses. What needs to happen before a transit agency were to be eligible for these DEQ funds? And I'll talk about a little bit of the project expenditure on the last bullet. Any vehicle, as Dan mentioned earlier, that would like to qualify for these DEQ Volkswagen Mitigation Trust funds, that vehicle first must be scored and ranked in the State of Good Repair merit program to make sure that the age and the mileage of the vehicle would rank it high enough so that it exceeds the FY22 funding threshold for State of Good Repair Type 1 assets. Once that vehicle has been ranked and scored by DRPT, during the application process, there's also an additional application for the DEQ portion to be awarded the Volkswagen Mitigation Trust funds. Finally, for eligible project expenditures, funding from the VW Trust may be used to reimburse awardees up to 100% of the incremental costs. And I'll just break that down a little bit. Once the vehicle is ranked high enough to make it through the DRPT process, DRPT in the merit process will cover 68% of that diesel bus. The local jurisdiction or transit agency is responsible for 32%. So if that bus is $500,000 and the electric bus is $1 million, the delta between what the base cost of the diesel bus is $500,000, that additional $500,000 to get to the total cost of an electric bus can be covered by the DEQ Volkswagen Mitigation Trust funds. Of course, the cap on that for any electric bus, that delta is with the electric bus and the charging infrastructure is $500,000 is the cap. You can see it there on the very last bullet point there. Currently in the Commonwealth of Virginia, there have been 3 agencies that have received electric buses that we have had ribbon cuttings for 2 of them, one down at Hampton Roads Transit in September, and then at Alexandria Transit Company during the month of October. And then finally, in the western part of the state, Blacksburg Transit has also received their electric buses. So this is a great partnership that DRPT has with DEQ. I've just named 3 agencies in the state that are moving toward electric. So this is something that we as an agency and as a Commonwealth are really looking forward to and excited about. And Jenna, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Clinton. Just a couple of questions that have popped up about the funding for electric buses. There are really 2 things that I want you to think about. So if with the VW mitigation trust, this is kind of a one-time opportunity that we can use these Volkswagen trust funds to offset almost pretty much 96% of the cost based on these thresholds that DEQ has established. That mitigation trust has a number of legal requirements associated with it. So we are bound by the trust that we have to replace 2009 model year or older diesel buses, and that the buses have to be scrapped. And when I say scrapped, they have to be destroyed. So that is something that if you're interested in the Volkswagen trust, it has to be compliant with those terms. There are some agencies that might have vehicles that are potentially, hybrid or CNG that they'd like to replace with battery electric. Those are eligible under our Transit Capital Program and our SGR match rate at 68%, but we cannot replace those vehicles with the Volkswagen trust. So I just want to make sure everybody understands there's kind of 2 parallel paths with battery electric as long as we have these Volkswagen funds available to us. So if you don't meet the terms of the Volkswagen settlement, there is still a path for you to access DRPT funding at the 68% match rate for either a replacement battery electric, replacing an existing vehicle with battery electric, or to do fleet expansion, adding to your fleet with battery electric. So there is no more penalty like we had in the past related to the increased cost that's associated with battery electric. So there's 2 parallel paths. If you have specific vehicles that you're looking at replacing and you would like to go battery electric and you're interested in the VW trust, your program manager can help walk through those specific vehicles and the requirements with you to make sure that we're all on the same page. I'm going to go ahead and launch another poll. Will your agency be applying for more or less capital funding in FY22? More, less, or about the same? So I'm going to leave that open for about a minute. If you have questions, feel free to send them along or raise your hand before we transition into the next piece of our presentation. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And over half of you are looking at around the same as fiscal 2021, and almost 40% are more than fiscal 21. So that is definitely encouraging. I don't see any additional questions right now, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Xavier to talk about our operating assistance.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, I'm Xavier Harmony, and I'm the other Northern Virginia Transit Programs Manager. I only have a couple of slides, so I'll go through them relatively quickly. Next slide, please, Jen. First, I'm going to begin by giving an overview of the operating allocation process. The FY22 process for allocating operating funds looks the same as FY21 because it is. There's no change between last year and this year. First, a sizing factor is calculated using operating costs, ridership, revenue vehicle hours, and revenue vehicle miles. As a reminder, due to the unique structure of commuter rail, it is treated a little differently and incorporates passenger mile traveled into its sizing. Next, the sizing factor is adjusted based on 5 performance metrics calculated using your agency's performance data. Finally, in order to ensure an even distribution of funding, operating assistance is capped at 30% of an agency's operating cost, with leftover funds run through the performance-based formula to be fully allocated. This process can definitely look a bit complicated, so I just want to remind everyone that we have detailed guidance about this process on the DRPT website, and your program manager will also be able to answer any questions you might have. Next slide, please. Now to look back a little bit at what happened in FY21. Overall, most agencies, 32 out of 40, saw a year-over-year increase compared to FY20. This is very similar to what we saw between FY19 and FY20, and it's encouraging as it suggests our process is working as anticipated. But COVID-19 has had an impact. We intend to carry forward performance data using FY21 allocations to somewhat mitigate the impacts of COVID. This means that we'll use FY17, FY18, and FY19 performance data in the operating allocation process this year for FY22. This is the process I described in the previous slide. In saying that, the FY20 performance data will still be collected and validated. So just want to keep you all to keep that in mind as your program managers will be reaching out in the next, probably next few weeks, next month or so, to request that information. And to continue talking about that, I will turn it back to Jen to pass on to Grant. Thank you.
We're collecting a little poll data here again, looking at your agency's ridership compared to previous years, just to get a little insight. And this is looking about as we expected, with ridership down from pre-COVID-19 levels, which emphasizes the importance of carrying those performance metrics that we use for FY21 forward to FY22, so that we can, mitigate some of that impact and basically hold the program harmless in terms of how the performance-based formula works. All right, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Grant to talk a little bit more about our performance data reporting.
Thank you, Jen. And the operating assistance was a good segue into performance data reporting. I'll give a brief overview of the requirements for performance data reporting, as well as a few minor changes that we made in Olga to help streamline the reporting process. Next slide. So first, just a refresher on the requirements in state code. In 2018, the General Assembly passed House Bill 1539, which required state transit operating assistance to be allocated solely based on performance metrics. So to comply with this requirement, transit grantees who receive DRPT operating assistance must submit monthly and annual performance data, as well as annual audited operating costs to DRPT. When reporting your performance data, we do ask that grantees carefully review the data prior to submission. And this is because data quality issues do impact all transit agencies across the Commonwealth. We have a limited amount of operating assistance funds that we get every year. And because those funds are allocated based on the metrics that you report, if there is an issue with the data that is submitted, it will not only impact the amount of funding that your agency receives, but also the rest of the agencies across the Commonwealth. So please do pay close attention to the data that you report in OLGA, because it impacts everyone. Next slide. For monthly performance data, we ask that grantees submit the data in OLGA on or before the last business day of the month for the previous month's activity. So, for example, the deadline to submit November performance data is December 31st. So it's the following month, the last business day. Specific data that's reported to DRPT on a monthly basis in OLGA includes transit ridership or unlinked passenger trips, vehicle revenue miles, and vehicle revenue hours. New this year, we did add 2 features to the monthly reporting module. The first being that we added an attachments feature, which we are asking agencies to basically attach supporting documentation for the data that they submit. The DRPT program manager will be reviewing these supporting documents, and we ask that the format that you attach your performance data, that it can be easily reconciled by the program manager. If you send us, an attachment it's an Excel file with 100 tabs and it's really complex, that's going to be really hard for the program manager to really understand and reconcile back to the figures that you reported. So it will reduce the amount of back and forth if you put it in a template that's easily reconciled. Additionally, agencies now must explain any data variances that are over or under 10% from the previous year. This feature went live a number of months ago, so some of you probably have already experienced this when you've been reporting your data. But basically, when you go into the monthly reporting module, and you plug in your figures for the previous month, it will then, the back end will calculate what the variance is from the previous year, and a box will pop up saying that you need to explain the data variance. Obviously, a lot of you all have seen some extreme data variances from last year due to the impacts of COVID. So it is totally okay that you will get this alert box. It just helps us better understand what's going on with your data variances, but you won't be penalized if there is a variance one way or the other. We just want to understand the reasoning behind it. Next slide. So for annual reporting, there is one piece of data that we ask for on an annual basis, and that's passenger miles traveled, or PMT. We use this data to calculate our commuter rail sizing metric as part of our operating assistance formula that Xavier described earlier. This reporting is not necessary for all transit agencies, but rather for those who submit PMT annually to the National Transit Database, and you should know who you are. If your agency does submit PMT to the National Transit Database, we do ask that you submit that PMT to us by mode no later than December 15th. So that's coming up in just a couple weeks. A new feature that we added this year. In the past, transit agencies have sent PMT directly to their DRPT program manager, but this year we built a PMT reporting module into Olga, where your agency can report this data directly in Olga by mode. This feature is located in the exact same module as the monthly data reporting for ridership, revenue miles, and revenue hours. It's just at the bottom of that reporting module. And because performance data reporting is a post-award requirement for agencies that receive DRPT operating assistance, there is some more specific guidance for submitting your data, which is available in the Purple Book, which is also located on the DRPT website. But if you have any questions about your data submissions or any of the new features that we've added, please contact your program manager, or you're more than welcome to contact me as well. So that's all I have on performance data reporting.
Yeah, let's pause here for a second. We have a couple of questions related to operating and also to the new features for performance data. I'm going to start with a question from Betsy Massey. For you, Grant, when will the new features in Olga for reporting, when are they going to be implemented?
The new features that I described are already live in Olga. So when you log into your account and go and submit your performance data, you should see all of those new features already. But if you do not, for whatever reason, please let us know.
Thanks. And a question for Xavier. This is Ms. Lenka's question from earlier. Xavier, when operating assistance is calculated, do the operating costs of demand response service as well as fixed route costs affect the allocation?
I don't think so, but I will have to double check that and get back to you. I don't think demand, I'm not sure about demand response, but I'll double check that off the top of my head.
And we'll check on that and circle back with you on that to make that clarification. That may also be in the operating technical guide. All right, we're gonna move. Actually, I'm gonna do one last poll, and then we'll move on and do our last couple of slides. So I'm gonna make one last poll live, and this one is about level of service and how level of service has changed due to COVID. We'll leave that open for just a minute. If you have questions, please let us know, but we're gonna go into our last couple of slides, and then we'll just do an open Q&A. Okay. Go ahead and close the poll. And so it looks like about 40% are almost back to pre-COVID levels, 27% significantly less, and 29% back to pre-COVID levels. So again, it's an encouraging sign. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Grant. I should say he drew the short straw and gets to wrap us up with the last couple of slides.
Thanks, Jen. So you can go ahead and next slide. So just to close out, we wanted to highlight some general notes regarding the grant cycle. I know we've said this throughout the presentation, but we just want to make sure that everyone knows that DRPT guidance and assistance is always available to you. So if you have questions about your applications or if you need clarification on anything, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. For transit agencies, the best person to talk to is always your DRPT program manager. But if you're an MPO or any other eligible applicant that may be interested in applying for our special programs, feel free to contact me as well. My email address is at the bottom of this slide, and then the rest of the transit leadership team's contact information is posted here as well. Additionally, we have put a lot of work into developing this grant program application guidance document, which we keep referring to as the blue book. This and the purple book, which is the post-award document, are posted on the DRPT website, which is drpt.virginia.gov. When you go to our homepage, there is a drop-down menu on the left-hand side of the screen. You first select transit, and then you click on the merit link, which will then take you to the page for all of our grant programs. And there's a ton of resources on that page. So please check it out if you have any questions. Next slide. And then last but not least, just kind of some key dates for everyone to be aware of. Today, December 1st, marks the opening of Olga. We are now accepting grant applications. The next date for everyone to be aware of, and this is really just for those agencies that report PMT to the National Transit Database, your FY20 PMT is due in Olga by December 15th. And again, those agencies must report the data to us by mode that you operate. On January 15th, this was mentioned earlier, Transit Development Plan and Transit Strategic Plan update letters are due. You can send those directly to your DRPT program manager or to any of the planners. Just make sure that you please submit those to us by January 15th. And then February 1st, we have a few deadlines here. This is when applications will be due in Olga. Additionally, your Transam updates are due on the 1st, as well as the 5-year capital budgets. Once February 1st is passed, then we kind of do our work and start putting together our draft program. That draft program is presented to the Commonwealth Transportation Board in April or May, and that's kind of the first round of public hearings. And then in June, we will take our final program to the CTB for adoption. And then on July 1st, we launch FY22, and hopefully it'll be a good year for all of us. So I think that is it for the timeline, and I'll turn it back over to you, Jen, if you want to do some general questions.
Yeah, so that concludes our presentation. I know it is very hard to sit through, over an hour and a half of content, and so we really appreciate everybody hanging with us. So at this point, if you have questions, you can either submit them or you can raise your hand, and I can unmute mics. And also, as Grant mentioned, your best source of information is going to be your program manager, or for the MPOs, your transit planner. So those folks are always available for you to assist you as you work on your application. All right, it is all appearing quiet. When we shut down today's webinar, we are going to have a survey that is going to launch, and would really appreciate if when that survey launches, if you could just take a minute and give us some feedback on the webinar. I appreciate everybody's patience today as we've kind of worked through some technology things. I am not the best technology moderator, so I've had a couple of little hiccups today, but appreciate everybody's patience and consideration as we've worked through trying to get you some content in during some challenging times. All right, so I still don't see any questions coming in, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Really hope that we will have an opportunity to see everybody in person soon. That would be it would be great if we could see you guys before we do this in the spring. So everybody take care and stay safe, and I am going to close us down now. And again, I appreciate your time today. Thanks, everyone.